Okay, my friends, are you ready to do a variation out of a grind, slide, or a manual trick? Many of us have this question once we feel a bit more consistent with certain tricks, but sometimes you can go about doing a trick consistently in ways where you lack control, stability, and the iteration to slowly improve as you put in those reps. And so today, I want to talk about how you can set yourself up in a much better position to do variations out of a grind, manual pad, or a slide if you choose to, or you feel like you're ready for it. So first things first, are you prioritizing being stable on a grind? Now, for instance, if I am in a crooked grind, am I centering myself over the foot leading the direction I'm going? So in this case, it's the left. If I'm doing a back tail slide, am I centering myself over that right foot? If I'm on the crook, I can pretty much be on it with one foot. But if I try to do that with the other foot, then the trick just goes away. And so you want to think about, are you centering yourself over the lead foot? That way you can prioritize stability. Another thing, when it comes to controlling that stability, you want to think about if you're comfortable going at the speed you're trying the trick at. So if you find yourself approaching the trick with a bit of tension, then you might want to think about slowing it down, or maybe even just choosing a smaller sized obstacle. That's going to help you improve your control as you iterate on that trick. So stability, the question you can ask is, are you centered over that lead foot? Control, are you comfortable with the speed and the obstacle dimensions? And then we go into, are you ready to do a variation out? Can you do the trick in a fluid manner instead of feeling like you're forcing it? When I first started learning crook, a big mistake I would do was think about slamming my foot into that grind. Instead, you want to feel more majestic, a bit more fluid when it comes to getting onto the grind. And it feels like you can just kind of lock on and wait for when it's time to flip out. So if it looks something like this, right? Let's see. Where my weight isn't centered over that foot, I'm towards the outside, and it was very short, then you might not be setting yourself up in a great position to flip out. Now, if you can do a crook where you can dictate the speed, where you want to do the grind, and holding it as well, then you're in a much better position to do a flip out. So I'm gonna give you an example of what that might look like if you film yourself and you see if you're a bit more fluid on the trick. Right on that one, my hands weren't going crazy. I was in control. I even gave a little nudge out, a little pop out. Those are good signs that will tell you if you're ready to do a trick itself. So if you're doing a no slide, the pop out or that nudge might just be here. Right? If you're doing a back tail, being able to control that pop out or the roll out of the trick is going to give you feedback to whether or not you might be ready to flip out of that trick itself. Because last thing you want to get yourself into is a situation where you can't even really do the trick itself that you're trying to flip out. So just because you've been doing this trick for years, but you've really never prioritized improving the control, stability, and being more fluid on the board or with that trick itself. And so this is a hard pill to swallow, but you might just want to practice getting that trick better itself. Now, if you're in a situation where that trick is first go every time, you can do it on different obstacles, then what you really want to think about is, are you staying engaged as you're flipping out? So a lot of times we lose our engagement, our posture, or our composure once we try to flip out. And so let's say I'm on the crook, right? With the crook, this is me composed, engaged, and this is how I know I'd be ready to go for the flip out. Now, if I go for the flip out and you start to see me disengage and then kick out for the flip, where I lose that engagement and that control, that stability, once I try the flip, then I want to think about slowing that down maybe, or making sure as I'm iterating on this trick that I am keeping the structure I need. I want to make sure I'm keeping that engagement even as I'm going for the flip. So here's an example of what this would look like as I lose engagement. Okay, so that was an example of where I'm doing it good, where it's composed, I'm engaged, but then as soon as I go for the flick, you can see me extend and go towards the back foot where I can't stabilize. I have to stay here so that when I go for the flip, I am still centered over that lead foot, and I am also able to stay engaged the whole time. So I need to do something like this instead of doing this, where I push myself off of the trick because of the intention to flip out. We have to flip, but it doesn't mean this has to lose that engagement. It's not to say that you can't land this trick without staying engaged, but it's going to give you trouble, headaches, frustration to be consistent, improve control, and feel like you learned how to flip out of your chosen trick if you go about disengaging. So you want to set yourself in a great position to feel in control and be stable throughout the whole trick, including when you go for your variation off of that trick itself. Okay, so you can see that even though I didn't flip it, that engagement was there, and when I landed, I was centered over that lead foot. So these are signs to tell you're going in a preferred direction, in a more efficient direction. Example of what it would mean to disengage as you're going for the and something that is also a good sign that you're ready to do a variation of grind, slide, or manual is if you're able to apply that pressure known as tension through the forefoot. So in this crook, if I'm doing my crook with my heel stabilizing here, it's gonna be so much more difficult to leverage that flip, right? If I am on the forefoot, but I'm on the trucks, it's going to also be a little difficult to stabilize and get that leverage. So on top of applying pressure through the forefoot, you want to make sure it's in a similar place to where it would be when you're going to nollie flip. So look, flat ground, where my foot is, my front foot to nollie flip. So if it's a kick flip, you would want it in a similar place where you would flip. You wouldn't want to try to kick flip with your back foot on the heels, right? Or with your mid foot getting in. You can do it, but it's not the most efficient way. So as you're doing your trick, think about how you can improve that control and that stability by applying tension and pressure through that forefoot. It still takes work, regardless if you're applying pressure or tension through the forefoot and stabilizing yourself over the lead foot and building that control, but you're always in a much better position when you prioritize actually learning that trick instead of just landing it and being okay with lacking that control and stability. Okay. That's another example of making sure I'm staying engaged as I go for the flick instead of just forcing that flick and disengaging. If you do the flip and you're engaged, and let's say you land here over the board, much better if you were to actually be on the crook, go for the flick, and land with one foot away from your center. My center right now is on the back foot, so me landing one foot like this isn't as good as making sure I'm centered over that board and engaged. Prioritize the engagement so that you can work from there instead of not understanding what you need to focus on, which is, do I need to stabilize more? Do I need to flick harder? Do I need to do this? In this situation, all you needed there was to fix the flip, right? Whereas if you're not landing centered over that board and stable, then you're not sure if you're going too slow, you're going too fast. And so just focus on control and stability. Okay, that was like in between good and bad. But let me just clarify. It's not to focus on control and stability, but prioritize improving that before you go for the flip out. And then even when you're going for that variation or that flip out, you want to make sure you're prioritizing that control and stability over something like if it flipped all the way. Okay, that was much closer. Even though I didn't land on the board, I was still over the board, and so that was a good sign. And you saw I was engaged. Okay. I disengaged right there. You saw my left side just come up, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I leaned a bit too forward, so I wasn't centered over that lead foot, which is why the board stayed behind me. Or I maybe just didn't do a good nudge out, a good pop out, and so that could be something I iterate on this one. At this point, I feel fatigue, so I need to prioritize being stable and having control with these attempts. I want to make sure I'm giving myself a breather in between these tries. So it's not simply making sure you're centered over that lead foot, but you actually have to take your actions that allow you to feel fluid, that allow you to be centered over that lead foot, and apply concepts such as those two. I was not even centered on that right. I wasn't stable throughout that whole crook. That was a lost cause from the beginning. That was a great example of not being centered over that left side. I was leaning out of that crook the whole time. Okay, I lost the control at the end. That was good. Ah! That was a great one. That was a great attempt. Like, we need to make sure we're doing the actions that allow us to apply these concepts. If you are someone who is struggling with consistency, control, or feeling stable on their board and ultimately confident, you might want to think about addressing some limiting factors, such as not being able to stabilize yourself or center yourself over that lead foot, and as well as making sure you're giving yourself some breather in between attempts. Because when you're in that session, you're just relying on pure grit instead of being a bit more intentional with your session. So if you're interested in that, you can hit me up at profe.carlos on Instagram so we can book a call and get you to feeling more controlled, confident, and on the way to progress on your board a bit more efficiently. No, that was it. Ah. All right, that's clearly a sign that I'm physically fatiguing. I can't even get onto the crook now. So one of the many factors that might be limiting you without you knowing. And so again, book a call if you want to learn how you can apply yourself a bit more intentionally and open that door of feeling more comfortable on your board. I was going forward right there. I'm probably too late. I'm fatigued. A lot of times, what has us not progressing in skateboarding is not having a good idea of how to get past frustration. So if you find yourself getting frustrated, think about asking questions that are gonna help you problem solve instead of looking for excuses to feed that frustration and have you not following through with the process of learning, which doesn't always feel comfortable. So that wasn't the best one, but you can see that being engaged over that left side helps so much when it comes down to feeling in control and like you're closer to that finish line, which is landing the trick. But on top of landing a trick, we want to make sure we're prioritizing control and stability, because once we land, we want things to click a bit better so that we can have that feeling of actually having learned that trick instead of feeling like we got lucky. So again, if you're someone who's in a plateau or wants to have some insight on how to feel a bit more confident on your board through control and stability, consider hopping on a call. You can send me a message on Instagram, profe.carlos, profe.carlos, so that we can book a call. If you're commenting, asking questions on the videos, I appreciate you so much. If you're someone who regularly watches this channel and you haven't subscribed, consider doing that. Apparently 77% of you guys who watch it consistently don't subscribe. If not, still appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.